Well, hello there, and welcome back to another tank review. I'm Corny Swiss, and today I'll be looking at the M26 Pershing, a rank 4, 6.7 battle rating American medium tank. Now, as with all reviews, and I know it's been a while, so just to remind you, all the various parts of this review are timestamped down below, so feel free to click off to where you want to be, but if you want to hear the garage portion of this review, let's get started. So the M26 Pershing was, I guess, the successor to the M4 Sherman. It was near the end of the war. It was determined that the Sherman just didn't have good enough protection, didn't have good enough firepower to go against German armor, and that's a safe assumption. It really didn't. So they were devising a way to put the 90mm gun onto a tank, and sort of an up-armored Sherman. There were prototypes with basically the Sherman chassis with the Pershing's turret and gun on top of it, but they ultimately decided on this chassis, which features better armor protection basically in all places, and just an overall more heavily armored tank. Now, that's not to say that the armor is superb, and German guns can certainly deal with the Pershing, but for what it was at the time, it was classified as a heavy tank because, well, it has 100mm of frontal armor, has a 90mm gun. That's heavy tank. For American military, that was a heavy tank. And it once the M103 came into service, we finally had a real heavy tank. The Pershing didn't see a ton of service in World War II. It came in at the very end of the war, and the Pershing ran into problems in Korea because the mud and things like that were difficult on this tank, which led to new designs such as the M47, the M46, which are based on the same chassis and are sort of developments from this initial design. So you can think of the Pershing as the precursor to the Patton series of tanks, and a lot of the lessons learned from the Pershing were applied to those tanks. But in terms of gun performance and armor, they're relatively similar. Just different abilities on less than desirable ground. So the stats of the machine. Like I said, M26 Pershing. It's a 41.6 ton machine with 500 horsepower at 2,600 RPM, and it has a listed top speed of 46 kilometers an hour. Now, American tanks generally aren't the quickest things, but those are generally Shermans that don't have a great top speed, but can get there fairly quickly. The Pershing I don't think of it as a fast tank. In my opinion, it's very rare that I get up to 46 kilometers an hour just with the tank's own power. With the Shermans, you could reliably get to their top speed. With the Pershing, less so. Now, it isn't a slow tank, and it is fairly quick and agile. It turns very well. The turret turns very fast, so it's a very effective close-range brawler. And it has a 90mm gun, which can have the punch at longer ranges, but we'll talk about my thoughts about the gun a little later. Maximum inclination, 30 degrees. Turret rotation speed, 24 degrees a second. That's pretty good for a turret mounted with a 90mm gun and relatively good protection. Vertical guidance, 10 degrees of gun depression, 20 degrees of elevation. It's pretty standard for American tanks. 10 degrees of gun depression is pretty good, and 20 degrees of elevation. Elevation is one of those stats that if you have to shave anywhere, shave in elevation, the gun elevation. I'd probably give up 5 degrees of gun elevation for 5 degrees of gun depression. I value gun depression way more than gun elevation, partly because it's very rare that I engage targets that I need more than 15 degrees gun elevation to hit, but something to keep in mind. So let's talk about the armor, because that's one of the selling points of the Pershing when it first came into service. It features 101.6mm of armor at the front. The lower plate is 76.2, and the front of the turret is where this thing's going to make the money. Because you look at this and you see the sloping, it's 130, 115mm in here. This machine gun port is 103 basically everywhere. The front of this tank, the hull is certainly not well armored, in my opinion. The gun's at 6.7 battle rating. you're running into King Tigers, and King Tigers are absolutely going to annihilate this front plate. Now, the advantage you have is in the turret construction. So we're going to first work from the inside out, or from the outside in, rather. So the sides of the tank, the turret, actually kind of wrap around to the front, and you can see here that there's a strip going along the side of the turret that's 76.2 millimeters. And with thanks to angling and just the weird slope of it, that's actually about 200 or so millimeters. And with that angle, it's very unlikely the shell is going to penetrate if they hit you on the very edge of your turret. It's just not likely to happen. If you come in a little bit, it's 101.6 millimeters, just like the hull. Which on the hull it wasn't great because it's basically flat. It's back angled a little bit, you know, at 43 degrees, which gives it, you know, another effective 30 millimeters of armor, but that's almost not enough. The sides of this tank here, it's very rounded, very sloped, very weird. So this 101 millimeters of armor is actually about 172 or so right in here. And there are sections where it starts to flatten out into the face of the turret where it's significantly less. I have been penetrated in the cheeks of the turret right here. High caliber guns can get through that. If we move in again, you'll see this is a plate, basically the front of the turret behind the mantlet. And as you can see, this is also 101.6 millimeters. So you have this, which wraps around to the edge, just inside the edge of the mantlet. You have this, which covers all the other space behind the mantlet, except for this middle bit in here where the gun is, that this armor didn't protect. Alright, and this is 101.6 millimeters, and across the top it's flat, but behind there it is rounded, it is sloped, as you can see from this sort of angle. And it does have the gun mantlet in front of it, which is actually the thickest armor on this tank, 114.3 millimeters. Thanks to sloping, at its the upper half, it's about 100. It can be up to about 200. It's usually going to be about 130 or so. On the seam, it's 116, and obviously the same all the way down here. It's 200 near the bottom, thanks to sloping. The key thing to remember, though, is that you do have another plate behind it, which is 101 millimeters. So that means the sides of the mantlet here and here, where you can see these two holes, that's actually very, very thick armor. That's in excess of, well, let's see, let's do some math. 102 plus 114, and they're both sloped. It's a lot of armor. It's an effectively armored turret face, and the Pershing can make this turret face work. The issue it runs into is that the sides here can be penetrated much more easily. And at close ranges, that's what's going to happen. It's much like on the T-32, where, yes, the gun mantlet is obscenely well armored, but the cheeks of the turret just aren't. So you can be penetrated there with APCR or very high penetration AP rounds. So the front of the tank isn't bad. Oops. The front of the hull leaves things to be desired. You can get a bounce if it's just weird, but it's very unlikely. And we'll see in a minute why that's kind of bad news. But the front of the turret is very tough. And being hull down, you have 10 degrees of gun depression. Usually you can make this turret work and keep this tank safe. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be brawling with Tiger IIs, right? And that sort of comes down to what you're shooting back at them. Side of the tank, the front portion, well, all the way to the back of the turret is 76.2 millimeters. I mean, for the side of a tank, it's not bad, but that isn't great, right? This is how they maintain the speed on the Pershing. They gave it a better engine, or at least a newer engine, and then cut armor off the sides and rear to keep its speed up. Side of the turret, 76.2 millimeters. It's pretty bad. Basically, if anything hits you in the side of this tank, it's going to cause you some real problems. In the back half of the tank, it's 50.8 millimeters. Rear of the tank, 50.8 millimeters. And the same deal on the other side. You have a forward section, which is 76.2, and a rear section, which is 50.8. And obviously the turret is still 76.2. So what does all this mean? It means you want to always kind of be facing the front. You can get away with a little bit of angling. Use your tracks to help eat up shots. But the thing is when you angle, this doesn't get much thicker. So it's almost, if you're in the open, you should always angle because it gives you that extra chance to survive. But in the Pershing, it's a pretty slim chance. You need to cover, you need to be hull down. If you're hull down, this tank can really, really work for you. But let's talk about the gun. Because the gun is sort of where this tank gets defined. When you first unlock this tank, you start off with the T-33 shot and the HE shot. Now this is an armor-piercing capped ballistic capped shell. It's a lot of caps. And it doesn't. It has the fragmentation damage effect, 853 meters per second muzzle velocity, 10.9 kilograms mass, 161 millimeter penetration at 10 meters, 151 at 500, and 135 at 1500. So let's think about our good old friend the Tiger II. With this shell, it'll be very difficult to penetrate a Tiger IIH from the front. Almost impossible. Borderline impossible. It's close. From the sides, the shell will absolutely cause havoc because the sides of a King Tiger are only 80 millimeters or so. So that's not a problem. But the issue is how often do you run into the sides of tanks? A lot of times you need to be able to engage tanks to the front. And the shell really doesn't cut it. It makes the Pershing into a flanking medium more along the lines of a Walker Bulldog or a Chaffee, more so than a proper medium tank. The next shell you unlock is the M82 shot. Now this shot does have the advantage of having the explosive damage effect, which you'll see put to good use. And it's basically the same shell, it's just the penetration values take a little bit of a hit. A couple millimeters across all ranges. Now, that puts this shell in the same boat as the previous shell. Doesn't deal well with the front of King Tigers, but from the sides will absolutely wreck them, and this shell more so because it has that explosive damage effect. Which means that if you do penetrate the side of the tank, it will likely explode, kill all the crew, or whatever happens in there, and the tank will be knocked out. This shell relies on being fragmented. This shell just fragments itself. So this is overall the much better shell, even though the penetration is lower. So I keep a small stock of these for the situations where I do come across the side of enemy tanks. Then we come to the M304 shot, which, as you can see, I've selected as my primary ammunition. And the reason is basically almost entirely due to the penetration. You shouldn't solely gauge a tank's ammunition based on penetration, but when it's the only shell that can deal with your adversaries from the front, there needs to be a healthy supply of it. This is an APCR shell, so obviously it has sort of a fragmentation style damage effect. 7.6 kilograms, it's not a light APCR shell. 1,021 meters per second muzzle velocity. Penetration is 254 millimeters at 10 meters, 241 at 500, 194 at 1500, and 171 at 2000. Basically, this means that if you hit the front of a Tiger IIH, you can penetrate the front of his turret, the face, out to well over 1,500 meters, approaching 2,000 meters. Now, it's difficult to hit the face of a King Tiger at that range, but if you do, you can penetrate. With the other shells, it's just impossible. It won't happen. And also, this APCR shell has the added benefit of being very fast. 1,000 meters per second muzzle velocity is pretty good, and the accuracy seems to be pretty good with it. So, it's almost by necessity, I feel, that you need to have a very healthy supply of this. I think I carry 10 rounds of the M82 shot, and the rest are M304 shots, so that would be 60 rounds, which is a bit excessive. I could probably squeeze in a few more M82 shots because I find it as a very useful shell, especially with realistic battle being changed not too long ago to have no markers above enemy tanks, so you find yourself flanking a little bit more than you used to, or at least when I first got this tank. So that's kind of my reasoning for why I carry a ton of APCR. It's just because this is the shell that gets it done from the front. The other shells just don't. And when you're in a medium tank, and if you're ever squaring off against a heavy tank or tank destroyers, you need to be able to penetrate your first shot and damage him in some way, regardless of what it is. If your first shot bounces or does no damage, his first shot's likely to cause you some serious issues in this tank, just because the upper glacis isn't that good. If the hull armor was great, then I would say I would load a lot more M82 shot and just close to very close range and try and hit lower plates and things like that. But that's not the case, and this tank in particular can lend itself to long-range engagements thanks to this APCR shell and the fact that it's relatively quick medium tank. You do have a 30 caliber machine gun. You get about 5,250 rounds of ammunition, so that's pretty good. But the gun it's not a bad gun. I actually like it. It's a good gun. 90 millimeters is a solid caliber. My only regret, when you think of it against the German 88, the long 88, the key difference between it is that the German 88 millimeter gun has a very effective AP shell with an exploding damaging effect. The Pershing doesn't really. It doesn't. It has an effective one from the side, but the advantage King Tigers have always had is that their AP shells can penetrate you from the front and cause significant damage. So that's a little bit of a knock against this tank, is that APCR just doesn't do the same amount of damage when it hits something. But, you know, at least you'll penetrate. And this is a medium tank with a quick rotating turret, and you can pull off some pretty crazy things in this tank. Rate of fire, my crew reload this tank at 11.4 seconds. That's not the best. I have a decent crew in this tank. And like I said, you carry 70 rounds of ammunition. So let's look at the X-ray of this tank. There we go. Now, a few things to note. Notice where ammo is located. Ammo is located directly down the middle of the turret, and if you're facing the tank, in the right cheek of the turret, right here. So I have actually been shot right here, and my ammo's been damaged, and you'll actually see it in one of the replays. But the turret is just, I don't think the turret is really a place you want to shoot this tank. It has a ton of armor. All the crew are sitting behind the thickest armor. So if you can avoid it, I would just shoot the hull, because you look at the hull. I mean, holy cow, ammo's all through here. You got the driver way over here. You got the machine gunner way over here. There's fuel tanks behind him. There's the engine. If you penetrate this tank from the front, the shell is likely to explode somewhere in here, and it'll hit ammo, and probably kill these guys too. Or just continue on through and hit the engine, set this thing on fire. So the front plate is definitely the place you want to shoot this thing if you have it. Now, if he's not showing his front plate, this cheek is not a bad idea. This cheek even is not a bad idea, because there's the gunner. You could probably penetrate here and nick him on the way out. Especially if you're firing an AP shell, if you penetrate here, the shell is likely to explode and kill these 3 crew members, which could be enough to knock out the tank. Alternatively, if you penetrate here, you might just detonate the ammo rack and cause some serious problems. So, when engaging this thing from the front, you really want to focus on this front plate, because it's sloped back, but you could also just hit this star. I am using a skin, so this isn't how the tank looks, and the link for the skin will be in the description. But you can see the issue this tank will have. If you want to hit this thing from the side, right above between the third and second wheels on the tracks, right below the center line of the turret, there's a whole fat stack of ammo in there, and that'll cause this tank some serious problems. If you don't detonate the first round of ammo, oh my goodness, there's more. Oh my goodness, you can pass through like 10 things of ammo, and you might detonate one of them, which probably will be enough. So, thanks to the layout of the tank, the ammo is generally stored below the turret, except for the bit that's here, and you can probably find a way of getting rid of that. I generally don't mess around with it because I'm dumb, but if I wanted to, I could probably figure out a way to get rid of this ammo. And people probably have. If no one has, then you can't do it, but oh well. I mean, a little bit of ammo above the turret is fine. It's just it's all down, most of it's down in here though. So you want to keep your plate covered here and just show your turret, because your turret is actually pretty effective. So, overall synopsis, the armor from the front, the hull isn't very good, the turret is pretty good. It has the thickest armor in the tank, and it's enough to get the job done. The turret turns really fast, and this tank actually itself turns fairly quickly, and it's certainly not a slow machine. Armor from the side is not good, as you'll see in one of the replays, and you really want to keep this thing medium range on the flank, where you can put more effective fire into enemy tanks. But thanks to the turret, it can go hull down against a lot of opponents. So, with all that being said, let's jump into the replay, shall we? So here we are in a realistic battle on the Carpathians map, and I'm driving the M26 Pershing using the skin I already talked about. Or if I didn't, it's because I'm dumb. There's the skin. I like it. It's nice. In this review, you're going to only see realistic battles, primarily because when I was gathering these clips, there wasn't a simulator battle event for the Pershing that I could use to gather simulator battle clips. But with The removal of target markers in realistic, you can kind of... The thing that made me want to include simulator battles was the kind of profile of the tank, how it works when it's not easily detected. The realistic battle without markers basically gets the same job done. So you're going to see 2 realistic battle clips. Both happen to be on Carpathians. Just the way it worked out. Didn't want it to be, but there was just a few days where I just could not get off this map. But whatever. Now, I'm following sort of a usual strategy, and a strategy I would do in most tanks, depending. If I'm in something much lighter, like a Bulldog, I think I would consider this and maybe flank out to the left wider, like go more east, but in a Pershing, this is an alright move. It's primarily because no matter what I'm going to face, it's not a given that my armor will be able to protect me. The gun mantlet might, but the hull armor isn't going to save me, whether it's IS-2s or King Tigers or Panthers or whatever. The hull armor isn't going to get it done. So, to some degree, coming up here is... You have to be... Ooh, there's a Tiger E right there. Headshotted his machine gunner, set him on fire, killed what looked to be his loader, maybe his gunner. Definitely his gunner, since he's not moving. Or else I got his horizontal drive. Kill assist, there we go, the T-44 dealt with him, which is nice. Well, the M26 does well when it has companions to help it finish kills off, because in my experience, the gun generally doesn't one-shot things. The gun generally does damage to things and can certainly hurt things, but it takes usually a couple shots to deal with a target. For example, the front of a King Tiger, AP isn't going to get the job done. So you got to use APCR generally, and the APCR round simply isn't gonna one-shot tanks really. It can, but it's just if you're playing averages, the smart money is on needing multiple shots. So it's nice to have someone else there to help you clean up the kills. I mean, that's true for most tanks, but especially with tanks that where the guns don't seem to not have a tremendous amount of punch. The 90mm gun is a good gun, but with the APCR round, it doesn't carry that. It's not a baseball bat like the 122mm gun is, or the 105 gun, or the German 88. And that's primarily because the German 88 gets a very solid AP shell. This gets, an AP shell that, like, for example, right here, I probably could have used. And in doing so, probably gets me the kill on the second shot. But the first shot, it took 2 shots with well-aimed APCR shots. It probably would have taken 2 with well-aimed AP shots. So that's why I think I default to the APCR, because it generally has the penetration I need for if I run face first into a King Tiger. And it has some stopping power. It's not great, but at least it'll penetrate. An AP shell that doesn't penetrate is useless to me. Now we're in a very powerful little flanking position here. Gonna knock out the King Tiger there. And I'm trying to finagle my way into getting a shot on the side of this Yak Panther. This is when AP shells would have been really, really good. And had I been thinking a little bit more, I probably would have loaded AP shells right here for that. But then again, it's like the shell was already loaded by the time I would have fired the gun. And my second APCR shell gets the job done just because I hit an ammo rack and it detonated. So it's a give and take thing. There are situations where I've pulled out AP shells and they've been effective for me. There's been situations where I've had an AP shell loaded and I've run face first into a King Tiger and just got absolutely wrecked because my first shell didn't do anything and his first shell caused tremendous damage to my tank. T-44 though is sitting here. He's about to shoot. Oh, there's that guy. Put a shot in. Alright. Kind of neutral outcome. It wasn't great. He's still alive, which is unfortunate. But he is turning a little bit more, which allows me to pump another shot into him. And we get the kill assist, which is fine. Now this next sequence is going to kind of demonstrate the weakness of the side armor. And The Pershing is not a slow tank, but it's not an extremely quick tank. But part of what makes it, I mean, gives it mobility is the lack of side armor. You know, the armor is centralized, and you know, if a Kugelblitz or Whirlwind catches you on the side, they're just going to pepper the side of your tank because they can penetrate it. You know, the side armor is not thick, and you really only have protection from the front and rear, and if the rear is using your engine blocks, you don't really want to do that. But anyway, let's move on to the next clip, shall we? As promised, we're back on Carpathians. This is another realistic battle, and it looks like it's American and Germans versus Russians. Some alternate history, I guess. In realistic battle, I'm glad that when they took out the markers, they did have the presence of mind to limit the teams, so like it's obvious who's on whose team in the beginning of the match. I mean, I guess if you're not paying attention, you could think that the Germans are enemies, but when the Germans have blue names over them, it's much easier to consider to not shoot them. And when the Russians don't have anything over their head, then you just shoot them. But it seems to me that realistic battle, it's alright. I wish simulator battle was back to normal, but you know, that's something else to discuss. That's not the point of this video. We're talking about the Pershing here. Now, I have a mind to let this Jagdpanther go first. And the reason is that the Jagdpanther sloped armor gives him a chance against large caliber Russian guns. My armor's pretty flat, and taking a hit from a large caliber gun will not do me any favors. Or this Tiger can go first. All things being equal, I'd prefer the Jagdpanther win first, but if the teammates want to keep pushing, we got guys pushing down there, which is nice, and someone just called out that, or someone did call out that there was an enemy in C3, so take a quick peek over there, but they're not immediately visible, so it'd probably be better choice to keep moving and move forward to one, defend the cap, but also, I mean, just get over the hill and make their position completely useless by being on the other side of a hill. So the enemy caps C. That's actually not a bad thing for us, because now we know where at least one of them are. And Russian tanks with long reloads, like IS-2s and things like that, it's good to kind of pin them down and then come at them from different angles. You basically assure that at worst case scenario, one of you die. Best case scenario, none of you die. But they certainly don't get a second shot off. This looks like a KV-85 or IS-1. I believe it's an IS-1. Yeah, it's an IS-1. His first shot damages my ammo. I guess he penetrated my turret, but no significant damage in terms of crew members or anything like that. I believe he's firing an APCR round, because he's not doing any damage. We're going to stop and we're going to plant our APCR round right through the front of his tank. That's going to kill a bunch of his crew members, set him on fire. And I do make a little mincemeat of killing this guy, but he is severely damaged. And I'm trying to line up a nice little side shot into his ammo rack, but he does move, and I didn't adjust enough. Because I kind of thought that's where I couldn't remember exactly where the ammo rack was. But at the end of the day, it's not going to matter a lot. Just put one through the front of the turret. There we go. All done. Now the enemies hold C, but we hold, I believe that's B. Yeah, it's B. And we have a very strong grip on this cap zone. Enemies coming over the hill. My first shot hits his engine. And this is going to be a situation where firing AP, I think it would have been the right choice. I don't think you could be faulted for firing AP right here. I think it wouldn't be a bad idea, basically. Because the side of it, he is heavily angled, but the APCR rounds they're going to penetrate very easily. So it might be a better move here. And then you can see I just switched to AP. And the goal of the AP shell, he's actually starting to land hits on me. It just looks like he penetrated somewhere and got my gunner and my commander. The goal here is to put it right through the front of his turret, and there it is. See, and the APCR shell wouldn't have done that, but the AP shell penetrated and exploded, and that caused some serious pain for his crew. So you really have to evaluate what shell is right. I generally say default to APCR shell and then switch to AP as it's needed. So in that situation, APCR was a solid first choice. And I don't think you could find fault with having APCR in the barrel. But once it became clear that the APCR wasn't the best shell, switch to AP. Now this, I mean, they're in a really awkward position. This is clearly, they're trying to get in a position that's weird so that we can't find them and they can just shoot us all and kill us. And this is probably when AP, this is another situation where AP would have been good. Because although it's at long range, which is, well, it's not really at long range even, but it is a small target, and I kind of wanted the most muzzle velocity I could to make sure I could land these shots. But an AP shell through the driver's hatch like that certainly would have knocked him out. However, I guess it's not clear if the AP shell would have actually penetrated. The reason I think it would is because he's unangled his front so much. We just took a hit from something. Didn't do any damage to us, and there's what looks like an SU-85 or an SU-100 moving down the hill. That's an SU-100. Now that's a little bit of a problem for me. It's a very powerful gun. T-34, T-34-85 I'm not tremendously afraid of, especially at decent range. However, okay, ignore that. Completely forgot that you can, that low wall would result in my driver being knocked out. But I get the driver back, I'm going to back up and go for some repositioning on this here. Oh, so KV-2 just knocked out that Tiger. Now, based on where he is, the KV-2 must be over near their spawn, or over at that, near the base of that mountain. Reason I say that is because, well, the KV-2 is covered to his left, covered by me to his extreme left. The only place he can be shot is from that hill, which would be bold, because it would have to travel through that stone walls, or from near their spawn, which has the cleanest line of fire. Now, as a tremendous shot from a KV-2, so I'm a little bit afraid. But in this position is usually pretty good, but here there's just too much vegetation, so I'm going to need to find a new one. And the Pershing is pretty good at shifting and coming to new positions and attempting to flank, out things like that, your opponent. The biggest thing though is you can't get in over your head, because although this is a solid tank, the gun I don't think will save you all the time. It's a very effective gun, but you can't rely on it just to one-shot everything like a T-54's 105 will, or a King Tiger's 88 most of the time will. Now, I know there's enemy tanks over there. I shot at 2 of them. I know there's a KV-2 somewhere over here, because he knocked out the Tiger. And I'm a little concerned about maybe getting flanked, because I am moving across the open. Now, I know there's an IS-2 up over there by B, because... oh, see that smoke? That was something. It wasn't the KV-2. Oh, that's a T-34-57. I'm not tremendously scared of the T-34-57. He's basically a smaller version of myself. He has worse armor. His gun is way smaller caliber, almost half. Not almost, but you get what I mean. I mean, a 57 versus that's a KV-2 though. We don't like KV-2s. KV-2 can't penetrate my front, but he can certainly cause a hell of a lot of damage to me. So killing him will be the priority. Because if the KV-2 hits me, it's very likely that I die to the T-34-57, because he'll just pepper me and be able to do whatever the hell he wants to me. Now this T-34-57 is going to be pretty sneaky, and honestly that's what I'm kind of looking for right here. I know the KV-2's around here, and I actually spot him through that bush there, thanks to just the backside of his tank, and I put a round into him, and I move forward to get a better idea of how he's positioned. And I put a shell in, and I switched to AP right here because I'm at close range to a target with 75mm of side armor that currently isn't angled at me as far as I can tell, which means that my shell should penetrate. T-34-57, it sounds like, just hit me. And there we go. That's what the AP shell's for. KV-2's dead. Now I need to find that T-34-57. Ooh, oh, he's behind me. Okay, oh, hello. This is where the turret traverse comes in. I still have AP shells loaded, and AP shell is the right choice here. There isn't really a part on the front of his tank I can't penetrate with AP. I'm spinning the turret, I'm waiting for him to give me a better shot, and when he does, we cause him some serious pain. But now it's time to repair. My engine's out, I'm damaged, I need to repair, and I'm very near the enemy spawn, so this isn't a good thing for me. Now, I'm positioning this way because that's where I expect them to come from. And you'll notice that my turret is facing backwards. And it's going to be kind of interesting, something that's happening very soon. I was looking at penetration marks. Oh, that's where he penetrated. That's unfortunate. Must have been a tiger. My turrets... I think the reason that what you're about to see happen is because my turret is on backwards. And as far as this guy can tell, I'm dead. But, let's see. Yep, someone just drove by me. I'm holding my... Oh, hello. I thought he was going to execute me. He must have decided I was dead. That's awkward. That guy must have been a little angry. Shell penetrates the rear of his tank, sets him on fire, blows up fuel tanks. All kinds of nasty things. And now I'm repaired. So now it's time to get out of Dodge. I don't want to be here anymore. Now the battle isn't won yet. That's for sure. We're gonna have to decap their zone and then defend D, because if they take D, then they might automatically win, and they have plenty of players still in the game. It's unclear as to what they're driving. Someone's driving AAA. I can't tell if that's our friendly AAA because he's pretty far away, or that's enemy AAA. But it looks like a teammate is heading up into C, or B rather, to start decapping it. And once he does, their ticket counter is going to start bleeding out. And once that's the case, yep, there it goes. We should be in a good position to win this battle. We have air support above, and they're taking out ground vehicles, and it looks like we're going to win this battle. It was a very fun game. It was amusing when the SC-122 drove past me. And I hope that showed a few different little nuances about the Pershing. The turret traverse is pretty good. The gun has the punch, and if you use the right shell, can really, really be effective. Oh no, we lost, lol. They went and captured D somehow, very quickly, and that was a little unfortunate. I don't like... I will say I don't like the idea that there's one little cap zone that takes like 2 seconds to cap, and once you do, the enemy team loses enough tickets to lose the game. I mean, because it was pretty clear we were going to win that game until that point. But anyway, all right, let's move on to the final opinion, shall we? What do I think of the M26 Pershing? I think the Pershing is a very solid medium tank. It's a pretty good one. The turret is good enough. The hull armors doesn't make me happy. The speed is pretty good. The turret turns fast. The APCR round is pretty good. I wish it had a more effective AP shell, which is what kind of holds it back for me. But all in all, it's a very effective tank, and can certainly can compete with, you know, Panthers and King Tigers to some degree. You want other tanks. You'd much rather have your T-32s fighting the King Tigers. They just have a more effective turret front to deal with the long 88. And against the Russians, 122mm guns smacking this thing in the face might cause some issues. Your mantlet might be able to take it, but anything else, no. You do have to be worried about AA, though, as you saw in the first replay, where the Kugelblitz just got my side and just peppered me. And they do that to a lot of tanks, but when American tanks generally don't have very much armor on the side, so something to worry about. But all in all, it's a very solid tank. 6.7 battle rating is kind of right about where it should be. I think I would prefer it if it wasn't, but I mean, I think we'd all prefer certain tanks being a little lower. But it's a very, very solid tank. It's good. It's at a pretty solid battle rating, good competition. Doesn't see 8.0 battle rating tanks, so it's very simple. And if you can get used to this thing, and if you can learn this thing pretty well, you'll have a fairly easy transition to the M26. because it is basically the same tank, right? It's just it has some minor differences, and it's slightly higher battle rating. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope it was helpful. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please drop them in the description, and I'll be more than happy to address them. And anyway, oh my god, I forgot how to speak English. But anyways, thank you for watching. I've been Corny Swiss, and I'll see you next time.